Hi, today we're going to talk about how to use completing the square to help us solve a quadratic equation and to find the zeros of that quadratic equation. So I tend to think of solving quadratic equations as having a series of different methods that you want to use when you're trying to solve them. The first method you always want to use to try and solve a quadratic is factoring. However, if you can't factor, then the next step would be to try something else. And I like to try completing the square under certain circumstances. In this case, because this number right here, this 4, because that middle number is even, this is a good completing the square problem. So I'll show you the steps that I use when I need to complete the square. Step number 1 is I'm going to move this 7 over here to the other side. So that's going to give me x squared minus 4x equals 7. Next up, I'm going to take a look at the 4, and I'm going to think in my head, what's 4 divided by 2? I'm going to cut it in half, which is 2. 2 squared is 4, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Now the trick here, there's two tricks. First, you have to take half of this middle number, half of 4, square it, which is 4, and make sure you add it to both sides. You have to add it to both sides in order for it to stay balanced. Next up, the left-hand side we can factor. This becomes x minus 2 times x minus 2, and this becomes 11. So then I'm going to rewrite x minus 2 squared equals 11, and now you can finish solving this. Take the square root of both sides, which gives me x minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 11, and then move the 2 over and you get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 11, and that's your answer. That's your factors. Then I'm going to do one more. So in this case, this is another good completing the square number. Our problem, and the reason it's a good completing the square problem is because it's all even, and that's usually a dead giveaway that this completing the square will work. One difference here is that you have a 2 as a leading coefficient. You can't complete the square when there's a leading coefficient like that. Remember, in the last problem there wasn't a leading coefficient. Well, there was, it was just 1. In this case we have a leading coefficient of 2, so I have a first step I need to do. The first step I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 2 because I want to get rid of that leading coefficient. So that's going to give me x squared minus 4x minus 18 equals 0. And now I can follow the same process as last time. I can move that over and I get x squared minus 4x equals 18. Then I can complete the square. I take half of 4, which is 2. 2 squared is 4, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And then I'm going to factor. X minus 2 times x minus 2 equals 22. And that becomes x minus 2 squared equals 22. Take the square root of both sides. X minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 11. Square root of 22. And then bring the 2 over and I get x equals, let me move this up a little bit, x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 22. Okay, a couple of things I wanted to point out. First, whenever you're completing the square, it needs to be in the proper order. So notice up here I have it in the proper order. X squared term is first, then the x term, and then the numerical term. So that's key. If this term was over here, I'd have to switch the order around. Also, I did two problems here that both had the same coefficient there, 4. If this had been, for example, if this had been 6, I would have taken half of 6, which is 3, and 3 squared is 9, and I would have added 9 to both of these. Alright, that's the completing the square process. Alright, so this is just a quick review of completing the square. You've seen this before in your Algebra 2 classes. And so you should be able to now do a few problems on the homework. Good luck.